Okay, let's just get one more thing in place. There it is. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, the 18th of December. First of all, apologies for not making the live show yesterday. I have had a cold, or because I'm a guy, the flu. I think it was just a cold, so I wasn't able to do it yesterday. I'm feeling 80% today. Still feel like my head is full of cotton wool, but I am here. Funnily enough, on the one day that I couldn't do the live show, the one day that I was out of action, that's when we got a bunch of new releases. We've got Gemini Flash, which is the lightweight, very fast version of Gemini 3. And we also got, at last, the image model from ChatGPT, so their new image generation model. So we're going to be covering both of those, as well as some other big news, things like Bernie Sanders calling for moratorium, a complete halt on data centers, and also the launch of the ChatGPT App Store. So I take one day off after a week of basically no news, but as soon as I take one day off, that's when the news comes flooding in. So we're back in, and let's jump in and see what has been happening. So first of all, let's talk about Gemini 3. So Gemini 3 Flash is a stripped down, lightweight, fast version of a Gemini 3. Gemini 3 itself is a very good model, state of the art. It is also quite expensive. It's quite expensive and it's quite slow. So when we are actually building with artificial intelligence, we tend to want something a bit more stripped back that can provide an equivalent, although slightly lower performance, but for a much lower price. And that's what Gemini Flash is. All of the big providers have something like this. So with OpenAI, they always have their main model, and then they'll have something called the mini version of it, which will be, again, kind of stripped back, much faster, much more lightweight model. If you are using AI on your telephone and you're just kind of talking to it via the app, via ChatGPT or via the Gemini app, this kind of thing it's not that important to you, because you're generally just going to be using whatever you're given. You're going to be given the default, so you'll be using 5.2 thinking mode or non-thinking mode. These kind of lightweight apps, lightweight versions of the large language models are only relevant if you are building. So if you're using the API, if you are putting artificial intelligence into something that you are building, an application, a website, whatever it is, then this is important. In Gemini 3 Flash, a lot of developers and builders have been saying, please, we need this. This is what we need, because Gemini 3 is not cheap. So this came out, would have been yesterday, and it's good. It's really good. I think why this is exciting is we now have basically a frontier level model for a very affordable price. We talk about this concept of intelligence that is too cheap to measure. So a point where we get to having very high levels of artificial intelligence allowed to us for us to build with, but it being so cheap, it being $0.0001 dollar per request, that we kind of stop thinking about the cost of it. And we are moving towards that very, very quickly. So they've released Gemini 3 Flash. They have Gemini 3 Pro and Gemini 3 DeepThink. DeepThink is only like in beta, and it costs a huge amount of money to run, and Gemini 3 Pro is the main model. So Flash has been the newest version. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to read their official announcements, because obviously they're saying it's great. But I'm going to hop over to what other people are saying. Okay, no, Jeff Dean works for them too, so that's probably not very helpful. So here we go. Kosuke says, Gemini 3 Flash is finally launched. Google has officially democratized frontier intelligence. So frontier at the forefront, the top models, making it available at scale for everyone. Coding performance is even better than Gemini 2.5 Pro, while the price is much cheaper. Well, 2.5 wasn't very good, so we're going to ignore that. Here's a breakdown of the new power. So the core capabilities, it's mainly for coding and tool calling. It's designed to handle complex agentic workflows. So if you're using it in Cursor, if you're using it to build something, and allows us to build sophisticated applications that actually work reliably in production. Okay, well, we have to test that. The main thing is that it's very, very cheap. So the performance leap, it's stronger than Gemini 2.5 Pro across most critical metrics, but here's the important thing. It is 50 cents for a million input tokens and $3 for a million output tokens. So that's very, very cheap. Let's see if we can have here we go. I'm going to pull this up. So let's compare it to Pro. So Gemini 3 Pro, it costs us $2 for every 1 million input tokens. This is 4 times as cheap as Gemini 3 Pro, and output price is $12 for every 1 million output tokens on Gemini 3 Pro, and this is $3, so it is 4 times as cheap as Gemini 3 Pro. However, if we look at the intelligence, it's not that far off. So Humanities Last Exam, HLE, for example, Gemini 3 Pro scored 37.5%, pretty good. I think that's the best one we have out there at the moment, unless Opus beat it. No, I think this is the best we have. And Gemini 3 Flash, which again is 4 times cheaper, got 33.7%. So it's still better than every other model apart from GPT 5.2, but it costs a much smaller fraction to run this model. And if we compare it to GPT 5.2, 1 million input tokens on GPT 5.2 costs $1.75, and 1 million output tokens cost $14. Wow, really expensive. So what we're getting here is a model that is extremely cheap, but also very good, very good. It is stacking up. It's actually better than Gemini 3 Pro in MMU Pro and Toolathon, apparently. So they've managed to make something that is, in certain cases, better than their existing top-level model, but it's a quarter of the price. Very, very, very cool. And very exciting if you build with artificial intelligence. Whether or not this is going to stick around as the pricing, I can't imagine them putting it up, but it is very cheap right now. And again, this kind of knocks the wind out of ChatGPT and OpenAI's sales. And I think the end of the year has definitely gone to Google, and they've managed to cement this with the release of Gemini 3 Flash, which is something we'll actually use on a day-to-day basis when we build applications. So I'm excited. I'm going to be playing around with it later. I think the essential context is, if you don't build, you might be wondering, what's the big deal? Why does this matter? So if I'm building an application and I want to give my users access to artificial intelligence, so let's say it's a meal planning application, and I've built it and I've released it on the App Store or on a website. Every time my user puts in information, maybe they take a photo of the meal they're eating, maybe they scan a barcode, and I'm pulling all that information into my application, then sending that information over to Google or over to OpenAI via something called an API. So I send the information there, run some kind of prompt, and then that information gets sent back. That's the input tokens, sending it to the Google server, and then the output tokens coming back, roughly. If I am doing this, I need to pay every single time my user uses the application. So the way I make money is I need to make sure that what I am charging my user is more than what I am spending on my AI usage. So often when you sign up for an application now, you'll have a subscription, and that will give you a certain number of credits, which will allow you to use their AI functionality. This basically makes the credits cheaper and cheaper and cheaper for me to provide to my users, and I can provide them more value at a lower cost. So every time a new model comes out like this, which is smarter and cheaper, that allows me, as somebody who builds, to provide more value to my customers. So this is good across the board. It's fantastic news. Whereas before, you could be destroyed by your AI costs, especially if you left them uncapped. If you said, oh, you get unlimited usage, somebody is going to abuse that, and they're going to absolutely hammer your AI bill. And then you end up with 1 or 2 people who are just racking up a huge amount of cost for you, but they're only paying a certain amount for the subscription. That becomes less of an issue when you have models like Gemini 3 Flash, which are a quarter of the price of Gemini 3 Pro. So this is great news. And it also means more competition. It means OpenAI, it means Anthropic, it means everyone needs to combat this, because otherwise Gemini 3 will just be the default that people are going to go to. So I'm going to be playing around with it later. I might put it into one of my applications on one of my websites and see how it performs, because if it is, let me see, if it is, I'm currently using 5.2, but if it is almost 8 times cheaper, so 7 times cheaper, then I'm going to use that. Awesome. I'm going to hop over to some questions. Pull this up. And again, apologies for missing yesterday. I've got a cold. You can probably hear it in my voice. I'm a little bit sick sounding. Although whenever I do have a cold and I do the live, so I do videos, people are like, wow, your voice sounds great right now. So I think I need to be permanently sick or start smoking, one or the other. Somebody just asked, is the UK one of the most AI ready countries amongst developed countries? No, I wouldn't say so. So the most ready amongst developed countries are China. China's in the best position, and probably America. But America's relationship with AI is fraught. I'm going to talk about that in a moment with Bernie Sanders, actually. So because it's kind of at the forefront of what's happening with AI, there's a lot of dissension about whether AI is a good thing, whether AI is a bad thing, and a lot of sticking the head in the sand as well. But no, I wouldn't say the UK is particularly well prepared at all. Unfortunately, we're not leading the charge in any of the technologies either. So we have DeepMind, which is here, but DeepMind was purchased in 2014 by Google for about 400 million, which at the time was an immense amount of money, and everyone was like, oh my god, why Google? And now is turning out to be maybe one of the best acquisitions in history, because 400 million now is pocket change compared to what is being spent. If you are interested in that story, definitely check out The Thinking Game. It is free. Oops, daisy. They've made it free over on YouTube, obviously, because they own it. So it's a documentary about DeepMind. And there we go. There's Shane Legg and Demisa Sabis, looking very young. So it's a documentary about DeepMind, and especially about AlphaFold, which was when they decided to, there we go, they decided to basically solve the protein folding problem, which unlocks the ability to create new compounds and to create new medicines, to create things that can break down plastics, etc. So it unlocks a huge amount of science. So that's what this documentary is about, and I highly recommend it. It is free on Google, or you can go onto the Google blog. If you just look for The Thinking Game, you'll be able to find it. So DeepMind is still based here in the UK, and it's mainly it's run by British scientists. So Demisa Sabis, Shane Legg, Mustafa Suleyman moved on, so he's over at Microsoft now, but the original team are primarily there. So they are doing amazing things, but they are technically an American company because they are owned by Google. I don't think that's a bad thing though, because it gave them the cash they needed to be able to do this. It gave them basically unlimited compute, and if you watch the documentary, you'll see what they do with that and be like, cool. Good move. Because Demisa Sabis in particular, he does not seem like a man who is driven by money. He's not driven by, I need to acquire more. He's driven by, I need these resources from a company like Google so that I can do more science, so I can build more and I can leave a mark. And he won the Nobel Prize, or shared the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago because of that. So I'd say DeepMind are kind of our biggest player. 11 Labs as well is a UK company, but apart from that, we're very much beholden to the American companies in particular. Okay, so Gemini 3 looks great. I'm going to hop over to OpenAI. They haven't been having a good few months, really. So OpenAI would have been 3 or 4 weeks ago. They announced a code red. After the release of Gemini 3 Pro, they're like, oh my god, something's gone horribly wrong and we have lost the narrative here. We are no longer the ultimate AI company. And they realized that Google had basically crept up on them. 3 years ago, when the first big public release of ChatGPT came out, Google had a similar code red emergency where they're like, they have stolen a march on us. Because Google actually invented, or under their watch, the transformer architecture. And the paper, All You Need Is Attention, was written by Google scientists. They had their own large language model called Lambda, which they hadn't released because they didn't think it was ready. or didn't know if the world was ready for it. So OpenAI just came along and was like, boom, here you go, ChatGPT. Is it ready? Nah, it's fine. Go for it. Have fun. So 3 years ago, OpenAI basically stole a march on Google and became synonymous with artificial intelligence. That's incorrect. It shouldn't be, because AI is more than just this. This is generative AI, this is large language models, and ChatGPT is an app built on a large language model. But in the public eye, basically OpenAI and ChatGPT became artificial intelligence. So that has been the narrative for the last couple of years, with OpenAI basically being at the forefront of development and everyone else kind of trying to play catch up. For the last 2 or so months, Google has shown that they're ready. They are here and they're ready to fight properly. So we had Gemini 3, we had Nano Banana Pro, which is phenomenal. And suddenly OpenAI were put on the back foot, which is good, in my opinion, because we want competition. So OpenAI have just released something called ChatGPT Images, which is powered by our flagship new image generation model. So if you ever used the image generation on ChatGPT before, it was agonizingly slow. Everything had that weird yellow kind of piss filter, and it wasn't that good. And it was not as good as Nano Banana, and it was certainly not as good as Nano Banana Pro, because Nano Banana Pro just knocked it out of the park. So they now have it released, GPT Image 1.5. It's okay. That's about as far as I can get. Now, this is not my domain. I don't really talk about AI art or AI music or AI creation that much. Other people talk about this a lot more. But from my very basic layman's knowledge, I tried it out and it's okay. I don't see any reason to use it instead of Nano Banana Pro. I think Nano Bananas Pro is better. And that seems to be what a lot of other people are saying, is that Nano Banana Pro is much better at realism. Nano Banana Pro can do text inside of images much better. So it seems like this is kind of a band-aid to catch up a little bit, but it has not beaten Nano Banana Pro. That seems to be the general consensus. I'd love to hear what you guys think, though. However, this has more distribution. Remember that ChatGPT has 900 million active weekly users. It's gone up now. So they now all have access to this model. So they have more people using it. It becomes the default compared to Nano Banana Pro, which still requires you to download the Gemini app, etc., etc. So I think this is going to be a big unlock for all of those 900 million people who have access to ChatGPT. And it is better. It's good. It's just not as good as Nano Banana Pro. Ben asked, does anyone but Google have a real moat? It's a big question. And no, I think is the answer. So at the moment, every single company are very much dependent on, well, NVIDIA. You've probably seen that terrifying diagram of all of the money going in a circle. It all kind of roots through NVIDIA at some point. So NVIDIA are building the GPUs, which allow for the training and the deployment of these models. We have a couple of layers. So at the bottom, we have cloud computing. So Google has its own. OpenAI are using Azure, so Microsoft's cloud computing. Anthropic, Anthropic are using AWS, Amazon's cloud layer. So you have that layer. You have a GPU layer, which is how you're actually training the models. That is pretty much NVIDIA. They're the only game in town, really. Huawei over in China are trying to get there, but then not quite there. So NVIDIA is the only game in town. That's why NVIDIA is worth about $5 trillion, the largest company ever in history, because they are providing all the GPUs. And then above that, you have different layers. So you have the application layer, which is where you actually deploy your AI. So in OpenAI's case, they basically have ChatGPT, the application. They have Atlas, which is their browser. This is what they were trying to expand the surface on which you use their products. But that's kind of it. Anthropic, you basically have the app. Whereas with Google, you have Google Search. You have Chrome when they finally add it. I don't know what they're waiting for. You have Android. You have TVs that are run on Android, etc., etc., etc. Gemini is able to be placed in many different locations, so they have a much larger surface in which to deploy it. And then you have the actual user base and distribution, which, as we know, basically wins all the time. Google own 90% of the browser market. So I think it's 90%, 90% of web browsers are Chrome. That's Google, so they have access to us. 70% of web searches are on Google search. I think 70% of phones globally are Android. The remainder are iPhone, etc. So Google have something that a lot of other companies do not. They own the whole stack. They own the cloud computing. They make their own graphical units, not GPUs, but they make TPUs, tensor processing units, which are specially made for machine learning. So they built Gemini 3 on their own hardware that they had designed. Kind of impressive. Then they have their application layer, they have distribution, they have data. They have scraped the whole of the internet, they've indexed all of the internet. They have indexed and labeled all of the images online through Google Images, which is why Nano Banana Pro is so good. So they just have this complete stack. They have the whole vertical in a way that no other company does. That puts them in an incredibly good position moving forward. And that's why it's kind of been surprising that for the last 3 years they have been misfiring. And things like Gemini 2.5 was fine, but it wasn't good enough to compete. That's why Gemini 3 Pro coming out was so impressive. It was like, okay, they're finally here. They have finally arrived, and they are finally using that whole stack, all of that data, all of that distribution, all of the cloud computing, their own TPUs, to build something that can compete with ChatGPT, which is super exciting. But it does put us in a position now, as Ben says, does anyone else have a real moat? No. OpenAI, XAI, and Anthropic rely on people continuing to give them money. With XAI, it's Elon Musk, he's got a lot of money, that's fine. But with Anthropic and OpenAI, that's why Sam Altman's always out there being like, hyping things up and saying, I need an extra, 200 billion. I need more billions to get there. It's reliant on that external cash to pay NVIDIA. So NVIDIA, again, are the ones making the money from this, and Oracle and various cloud platforms. But that is a very problematic position to be in when the only thing that you really own is your large language model. And we're now seeing other competitors who are able to build one that's just as good, if not better. We're able to see Chinese labs coming out with models that are as good and open source, so free for people to deploy. That also undercuts their narrative of, you just need to give us more money and we'll make it to profitability. So it's looking rough for OpenAI. This is not investment advice, by the way. Whereas Google, I think, are in a good position just to do what they're doing. They have the cash, they have the whole vertical, and they can just basically choke out the competition. I think that's what we're going to see over the next few years, but who knows? That's all speculative. Ben saying also Google captures 4 times the internet traffic than anyone else can see. More data, another competitive advantage. They have the data. Over the last few decades, that's what they've been building up, is getting all this data, labeling that data. You hear people talk about how the internet is basically the training phase for artificial intelligence. So for the last 20 years or so, we've just been putting everything we know online, and that now becomes the data with which we train our next technology, which is artificial intelligence, or generative AI specifically. And if that is the case, then Google are the ones who own all of that. They have indexed it all, they've labeled it all, they have it already. So when it comes to training models, both text and visual models, they're in a really good position. And video, because, they own YouTube. Yeah, a really good position. If you were a regulator, would you try and break up Google now? Everyone's trying to break up Google all the time. I don't think the regulators necessarily understand what's happening, because they were focusing on things like web traffic. As you say, they dominate web search, and breaking up things like the browser. I think it's more than that. It is the fact that they own all of the data from all of these different services, and they're going to be using it to train artificial intelligence, which is, it's much bigger. It's every part of their ecosystem all going into one central product, which is going to be the artificial intelligence. It's weird though, because if you break that up, Google might die. because Google are currently reliant on search engine advertising, and search as a whole is going to die off. We're not going to go to Google. We're not going to go to search engines to find answers to our questions. We're not going to look up information as much because we can now generate it using AI. And even Google know this, which is why they've added AI overviews to the top. They know that they're cannibalizing their own business model, but they have to get ahead. But currently about 70% of their revenue comes from search advertising. That is at risk. So Google are also facing an existential crisis. They could use that to argue against it being broken up, basically saying that harms our AI division, and the AI division and generative AI is the only way that we can survive, which would be a very strong argument because their current core business is very much threatened. But funnily enough, they are now the ones threatening their own core business. They're going to have to cannibalize their own cash cow in order to survive over the next few years. I'd be fine with letting them dominate if they were still against evil. Yeah. So their early, what was it? Was it a slogan, a catchphrase? Their early kind of mission was just "Don't be evil," but they quietly sunsetted that phrase and replaced it with something else. But the idea that they got rid of "Don't be evil" was like, no, that's a decent a decent standpoint. We can keep that. Don't be evil. Right. This is really cool. So I saw this on Twitter the other day. There's this guy called 0.005 seconds. I don't know his real name. So he realized that there's a huge corpus of Chinese scientific research that the West and English speakers primarily do not have access to because it's in Chinese. And he launched something called China RVIX, China RVIX. I don't know how we're pronouncing that. Which is basically translations of this Chinese scientific corpus, and he's using AI to translate them. And he realized, okay, to get all of these preprints, including the figures, and to translate them all is going to cost about $25,000. So he said, I'm looking for funding. I'm looking for some help getting this done. So if you go over to the website, he's got a supporters page. There we go. And he gave his Ethereum and his Bitcoin address, and he said, hey, it costs about 50 cents per paper, so we need about $25,000 for this. One person sent him the money. One person was like, cool, sounds good. So this DGMA guy said, for American exceptionalism, I decided to fund this in its entirety. Chinese research is close behind, if not already ahead of the US, especially in things like fusion. Language barriers make that knowledge transfer one-sided. Time to stop assuming China cannot innovate. And this guy sent, is this one or two? Oh no, sent, yeah. So he sent the 25,000 like that. Just sent it through and funded the project in its entirety. That's very cool. So now Kimi, I think he's using Kimi K2 to translate everything from Chinese into English. He's got the 25,000 required to get it done. Really, really cool. What I think is absolutely phenomenal, though, and I don't know if people realized how exciting this is that the whole entire corpus of a language group of Chinese can be translated for $25,000. That's not much money. You'd expect this to cost millions to get the whole scientific preprint structure and bring it over into another language accurately. That should cost millions because normally you'd be hiring technical translators because it's scientific. No, 25,000 because they're using artificial intelligence, and apparently it's high enough quality as well. So I think that is the most astounding thing here. Not just that he put this together and he said, hey, I need some money, but the fact that it can be done for basically pennies. This is $25,000 is less than half of one translator's salary, I'd imagine. Yeah, it's nothing. It's basically pennies. And it was funded in seconds. So very, very, very cool that this whole body of scientific research that has not been available to Western researchers is now going to be in the next few months because they're just going to run it all through artificial intelligence. Extremely cool. Yeah, it's one of those, wow, okay, AI is quite impressive, huh? So, a very exciting piece of news. Let me scroll away from that. All right, let's look at where is it? Yeah. So there's another release from OpenAI. Again, a bit of a weird one, but they have finally released their App Store. So a couple of months ago, they released their SDK, Software Development Kit, allowing people to build applications that would live inside of ChatGPT. What I'm going to show you is what that looks like. So first things first, it's kind of hidden. And considering it's a new thing that they're trying to push, I don't know why they hid it this much. You have to go into the plus, then you need to go into more, and then it's all the way down at the bottom in Explore Apps. And that opens up basically an app store within your ChatGPT. There we go. You can see we can get Apple Music, Airtable, Spotify, OpenTable, Instacart, Replete, Lovable, Figma. Okay, so we've got some vibe coding tools in here. Zillow, I can buy, rent, and sell homes using ChatGPT. That sounds high risk, but okay. All Trails, Thumbtack, DoorDash, Peloton, sure, why not? Adobe Express, now that one's really exciting. I think Canva's here too. Yep, Canva's as well. Dropbox, Coursera. So a lot of companies that you'll know already have built applications that now live inside of ChatGPT. Very, very cool. And an upgrade, I think, on things like custom GPTs. Obviously, these are more official. These are apps. And also, you can submit your applications to be hosted in this store. Right now, it's very limited because they're kind of they've just come out of beta. But there are a decent amount in here, and it's worth looking through them all. Airtable, I mean, that's genuinely quite useful. I think they've added, interestingly, the Google stuff. Yeah, Google Drive. So you could probably give it access to your Google Sheets, etc., and it will be able to pull in that data. That's extremely useful. I don't know why it's so hidden away. Oh, wait. That wasn't there earlier. Okay, it's less hidden away now. So they've now added it onto the left-hand sidebar as well. Okay, earlier today that was not there. So maybe that's been a bit of a rollout. So I'll take that back. It is now available in the left-hand side. And it seems to be available in the UK. Often they stagger these rollouts, but this is being done immediately. So I think this is very cool. I think what is even more kind of groundbreaking here is the fact that this is available inside of the mobile app. So inside of the iOS mobile app. Apple are normally very, very wary about allowing people to have kind of their own app stores inside of apps that are allowed on the Apple App Store. So there's a few layers there. And especially with the case with Fortnite. So Fortnite allowed people to purchase Fortnite bucks or whatever, V-Bucks, inside of Fortnite itself, which led to a huge lawsuit between Epic Games and Apple, with Apple wanting full control and wanting obviously to take 30% cut of anything that was happening. So the fact that OpenAI have been allowed to have a little app store inside of their own app, which resides inside of the Apple ecosystem, is, I think, quite telling and exciting. Now, these are not charging as of yet, but I wonder if that will be opened up in the future. Especially exciting if you are going to build your own app, you are going to submit it to this app store and get distribution via the ecosystem. Because remember that ChatGPT has 900 million users, weekly active users. If you can build something useful that people want to use and you get it into this app store, that gives you a massive distribution, absolutely massive. And if you can monetize that, that's going to be a hell of a thing to do. If you are interested in that, look at the, I think it's App Store SDK, OpenAI. They have all of the, here we go. This is from a few months ago, they opened it up, but now we're just seeing it release. So introducing apps in ChatGPT and the new apps SDK. So you can build applications for them, you submit them as you would if you were submitting to the Apple iStore, Apple App Store, or to Google Play. You go through that submission process, etc. But this is now going to give you potential access to 900 million users. Very, very, very cool. So don't wait if that is something that you want to pursue. Sarah Jane says, I wish they would launch Sora in the UK. Yeah, they've so I actually wrote a guide about this. It is possible. So I've been using Sora. Well, like all of us, I used Sora for the first week or so. A couple of ways to do it. If you are outside of the US, you can VPN. You VPN to America, but you don't access it through your application, ChatGPT. Sorry, through the phone. You're going to go to sora.chatgpt.com. You're going to go directly to this website whilst you're VPN'd in, and this allows you to get in. You do still need a code though, but that's how you bypass the location requirement. Is you do not use it via the app, you use it via the browser version, and you use a VPN to switch your browser to the USA or Canada. You then need to get yourself a code. There's a few ways to get them. The best way I found to help people with this was in the OpenAI Discord. There is a specific channel which is called Sora 2 Code, where people are sharing their codes. Fair warning, there are a lot of people just spamming random nonsense code. I don't know why. They are just wasting time. Their time, everyone's time is pointless. But there are legit ones in there as well. And if you spend half an hour in there, you'll be able to find a code eventually. There's also this Reddit mega thread. I don't know how alive this is anymore. No, I don't think it is. It's moved to the Discord. Because this one was working a few months ago, but now the Discord is going to be the best place to get it. How are we do for time? 37 minutes. I've got a few other bits and pieces. I guess let's talk about Bernie Sanders. So let's pause him here. So Bernie Sanders over in the US is calling for a moratorium on the deployment of data centers that are being used for artificial intelligence. So I'm pushing for a moratorium on the construction of data centers that are powering the unregulated sprint to develop and deploy AI. The moratorium will give democracy a chance to catch up and ensure that the benefits of technology work for all of us, not just the 1%. So he's been community noted. That is not surprising. He's being supported here. Oh no, he's not being supported. So this is Elisa Yudkowsky, who wrote If Anyone Builds It, We All Die, which is a great name for a book. I have it on my shelf behind me. So even he's saying the training of ever smarter AIs threaten all life on Earth. We need international treaties to shut down their escalation and proliferation worldwide. It may not help much if the physical data centers just move to other countries. A superintelligence is not a regional threat. So this is my main. I'm 100% in agreement here with Eliza. The shutting down the progress or pausing or stopping in any way the progress of artificial intelligence in one country does not matter, because this is a global development. So if we shut down all of the data centers in the US, China will just continue, and China will win this race. They will get to AGI or whatever much faster than America. So this is not me beating the drum for American exceptionalism and wanting to be hawkish and beat the Chinese. This is just a pragmatic reality here. If one of the nations, America or China, stops pursuing artificial intelligence, the other will win. It's as simple as that. So Bernie Sanders is very much focusing on the fact that it is, in America, it is the billionaires who are running artificial intelligence right now. All of them are multi-billionaires, and it's being concentrated, all of that money, into the hands of 10 people, less than 10 people, a very, very small amount of money. In their defense, they're not making much money. They are hemorrhaging cash. They're losing a lot of money from training artificial intelligence. But the idea here is that if we do reach AGI, then whoever is holding the reins and whoever gets there first is going to make an exceptional amount of money. That said, stopping it in America is not practical because of the threat, and this guy is one of the most this guy Eliza, I hope I'm saying it right, is one of the most staunch critics against artificial intelligence, and even he is saying, Bernie, this isn't really going to work. We need this to be unilateral. Yeah, so I'm with Bernie Sanders on a lot of things. I'm very progressive, I would say, but this I think is a little bit. It's a misunderstanding of the situation and not really understanding that this is a global issue, and just pausing it in America is going to be a disaster, not just for America, but for the West. Not that I particularly have a horse in this race. Whoever wins this will win this. But this would very much give it the win to the Chinese immediately. So lots of people are disagreeing with him. Lots of people are disagreeing from different angles, which I find fascinating. So even people who are anti-AI are disagreeing with Bernie Sanders. A lot of people are saying, you don't really understand what's going on here. This is more than a political issue. You can't just win votes on this. You need to understand the fundamental reality of what is happening here. I like Nick here. Are you trying to NIMBY data centers? Constrain AI compute and free tiers will vanish and only the rich will have the best AI. Imagine going to school and only the rich have AI to help them learn. This will do exactly the opposite thing to what you were aiming at. I mean, we're already seeing this with higher end models like Claude Code, for example. Claude Pro costs about $200 a month, which if you have the money, is one of the best investments you can make. If you don't have $200 a month to spend on that, then you are cut out and you are suddenly 10 times, 20 times less productive than somebody who has access to that tool. So already we're seeing a bit of a divide, and we kind of want more like what Google have just done, which is pushing forward this technology so it becomes cheaper and more available to more people. So Gemini 3 Flash, which just came out a few days ago, is extremely cheap. And that allows us to put AI into the hands of more normal people. The constraint here is that normal people, the non-billionaires, the non-business people, need to start using it to take control of their lives. We're at a point where anyone can start a business using artificial intelligence. Anyone can start to monetize this. Anyone can do very well. But we need to make sure that everyone is educated on this. So it's not just the billionaires. It's not just the tech bros who are running away with this. So sticking our head in the sand and saying, make it go away, is not going to help in this case. We need to instead take responsibility for ourselves, learn how to use this tool, learn how to carve out a life that is good for us and our families and our community around us moving forward, which is difficult, but is going to be well worth it in the next couple of years. I'm going to look at one last article. Now, this is incredibly anecdotal, but I wanted to put it in the newsletter, so I'm covering it now. So it's in the Spectator, and it has the rather clickbaity headline, AI will kill all the lawyers. A barrister's warning. I'm going to put it in the newsletter because it's good fun. Basically, have I just been... Okay. Basically, the journalist goes out for drinks with one of his mates, who's a barrister, or he's an English barrister, senior English barrister, and proceeds to just get him drunk. I don't know about the ethics of this piece, but it's very, very revealing. So they go through several cocktails, and every time they have a drink, it's mentioned. But the barrister, the senior barrister, is basically saying, it's game over for us lawyers. And he's saying, I'm old, I'm going to be retiring soon, but if you are young and moving into law right now, you're in a lot of trouble. So he's called James, he's anonymous. James has come to believe that AI will completely destroy the law as we know it, wrecking careers, ending systems, making thousands jobless. And the Armageddon, he says, is coming faster than almost anyone realizes. As he sips an espresso martini, this is the first of many they have during this, he prefaces his case with some context. You saw the headlines about the Sandy Peggy case, where the judge allegedly used AI. Well, believe me, this is just the beginning. AI is coming for us all. I think this is the big one here. Last week we did an experiment, a kind of simulation. We took a real, recent and important case, a complex civil court appeal, which I wrote, and it took me a day and a half. So this is a senior barrister. It took him a day and a half to write it. We redacted all identifying details for anonymity and confidentiality, and we fed the same case to Grok Heavy AI. Strange choice, but okay. Then we asked it to do what I did. After some prompting, the end result was, he shakes his head, spectacular. Actually staggering. It did it in 30 seconds, and it was much better than mine. And remember, I am very good at this. It was at the level of a truly great KC, the best possible legal document, and all done in seconds for pennies. How can any of us compete? Yeah, I think that's the quote here. It was the best legal document. It was the best work possible, done in seconds and for pennies. How can you compete? If something is fast, if something is cheap, and if something is good, then that knocks the economics of the situation out, and humans cannot compete. Yeah. So he says it will work its way up the legal hierarchy. First the grunt work, then the drafting, the citation, the argumentation. Eventually the majority of legal jobs will be replaced. Process lawyers are obviously doomed. AI will handle the most complex probate and conveyancing cases in seconds. So anything that is relatively algorithmic, that doesn't require a huge amount of creativity, but just needs to go through the process, then AI, done. The most complicated human skill will be, he chuckles sadly, to scan and digitize paper documents. Barristers will make arguments in courtrooms that are drafted by AI, and then people will wonder why they are paying human barristers £200,000, and they too will disappear. With rare exceptions, law is finished for almost everyone, maybe even the judges, as we've seen in the past few days. So I'm going to put this in the article, in the newsletter. It's an interesting piece. It is highly anecdotal. It is one senior barrister who's getting drunk with his friend, but I think it's probably quite accurate. AI is coming for most jobs, especially for things like law, where a lot of it is algorithmic. It will be coming for the low-level jobs first. So when you become a law clerk, you're going to be doing an awful lot of like discovery, which is basically going through a lot of documents and finding patterns and cross-referencing. AI is really, really good at that. So that's going to knock the bottom out of the legal industry. Then you're not going to have people who are learning the ropes. They're not going to be cutting their teeth on that grunt work because that's been replaced. So how do you move them into the higher echelons? So you end up with a pyramid with the bottom collapsed, with people not moving up. At the same time, the AI is getting better and better. It is moving from, what's the one he says here? From grunt work, then drafting, then citation, then argumentation. It will be moving up as the AI gets more and more advanced. And it will be brought in to these firms because remember, the people who are running these firms are closing in on retirement and they want to make as much money as they possibly can in the next 10 years. So you bring in artificial intelligence to help to increase those margins by removing labor, which is extremely expensive, so that you can retire in 10 years' time and be in a very comfortable position, and you don't really care that much about the future of the firm or the future of the industry as a whole. James seems surprisingly cheery given his theme. To be honest, a lot of lawyers deserve what's coming. Again, he is a senior barrister. Too many of them are greedy, selfish, not yet self-aware. They create complexity purely so that they can make more work for themselves, and activist judges are a curse which will soon be lifted. Maybe in the end this will be a good thing, even if 100,000 unemployed barristers will be a bit destabilizing. Think of an army of penniless, pompous, progressive lawyers with nothing to do. Obviously, I'm not going to say any of this to any of them. They would hate me, but someone has to be honest. I have one last question. This is the interviewer. Right now, young people are studying law and considering doing so. Does James have any advice? He sits up full of passion. James says, my niece is a lovely girl, really smart, great at school, and the other day she told me she wanted to be a lawyer, and I thought, oh my God, my little niece wants to be a lawyer. And I flat out told her, I said, please do not destroy your life. Do not get into a lifetime of debt for a job that will not exist in 10 years or less. Yeah. Anyway, I will put this article in because I think it's a lot of fun, as well as the other news that we covered, the release of Gemini 3, the image model from ChatGPT, the translation of the entire the entire preprint from Chinese archive using artificial intelligence, and then the ChatGPT store, Bernie Sanders, and a bunch of other news items. Awesome. If you are not already subscribed, you can subscribe to the newsletter over on aiwithkyle.com. There is also a community where we discuss what's happening in the news, where we talk about AI, where we all get AI ready together. The focus is mainly on helping you to start a business using artificial intelligence, but part of that is also just keeping up to date with what on earth is happening. So we do a lot of discussions about that as well. And also on the website, you can find a huge number of courses, all for free, and a catalogue of all my playbooks. And there are, I think, 100 or so playbooks in there as well. So come along, join the newsletter and the community, and I'll be helping you get AI ready, because we need to, because it's coming at us like a speeding train. So again, that is aiwithkyle.com. If you are not already subscribed on YouTube, please subscribe there as well, because you'll get this live, but it will be a lot more edited. It will be less of me babbling, less of me going on diversions. So it's going to be easier to access the information that you actually need. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow for another live. Cheers.